just past downtown LA. By the time the May of that year,
Okay.
I moved in
So
June.
this is going to be a very special Dean's panel in the afternoon. We've got 4 of some of our most popular deans here. And we're going to have a little bit more of an intimate discussion, definitely based off of a lot of the more popular questions that we've been getting in online. We can have a full discussion about it in a little bit more of an intimate setting. So we're going to start off again with having our deans introduce themselves, and then we'll get to some discussions of some really popular questions.
I'm Dr. Richard Wiseman. I'm Dean for Admissions at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine in Miami, Florida.
My name is Kevin Watt. I'm the Assistant Dean of Diversity and Inclusion at Wright State University, Boonshoff School of Medicine, Dayton, Ohio.
And I'm Leon McDougall, Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion at the Ohio State University College of Medicine.
And I am Ted Hall, Assistant Dean for Student Affairs and Admissions at the David Geffen School of Medicine in Los Angeles, California.
Okay. So first question I think that we want to start off with today is, are any of your schools moving to the MMI? And if so, why are your reasons? And if not, why not?
We have actually already moved to the MMI, the multiple mini interview format. We did our first class this past year of 680 students that we interviewed through the multiple mini interview process. We made the change because we felt that it was maybe a reflection of a slightly different way of looking at applicants, looking at their attributes that we thought would be important for them to become successful as physicians and as medical students as well, in a more standardized way of approaching that kind of an evaluation.
And I think we should clarify just what the MMI interview process is, if you would like.
Sure. The multiple mini interview process is, I tend to think of it as a speed dating kind of process. The applicants will rotate through a number of clinical scenarios or case scenarios, let's say. They're not all clinical. Usually there's anywhere from 9 to 10, maybe 12 stations that they could go through in some cases. And each of those case scenarios will have a different attribute that's attached to them. The applicant will have roughly 2 minutes to read the case scenario before they enter the room to discuss that particular case scenario with the interviewer or rater. And over that period of time, then they'll have a formal discussion with them, and then they'll be excused from the interview room, at which point they will move to their next station to discuss a different case scenario, again given 2 minutes at the outset to read the case scenario before entering the room. The process, basically, we score the applicants on a Likert scale, and each of the interview or raters are given a script of how to evaluate them and what they are looking for in that particular scenario in terms of scoring them.
As far as the Ohio State University College of Medicine, over this past spring, we had a strategic review of our admissions process and closely looked at the MMI and really liked the outcomes that were shown with the previous studies, especially out of McMaster's in Canada and the University of Cincinnati. We did not elect to fully implement the MMI, but we have undertaken some changes in our admissions process where we are asking more standardized questions to get at some of those attributes that Dr. Hall was speaking to, and with that standardization of the interview process, hope to be able to really more clearly identify those students who would display the non-cognitive attributes that would lend itself for them being an outstanding physician.
I think at Wright State we have not looked at much of changing what we've done there, and part of that is we think we do a really good job at looking at non-cognitive things prior to them even coming in for an interview. And so we have a number of different community people physicians and students on our current admissions committee, and for us, we don't, not that we don't like change, but we don't see that we need a change. We have a pretty good handle on what we're doing at this point, and we've continued to do the same thing.
We've kind of taken the same approach at the University of Miami, where we've looked at it and we're kind of keeping an eye on it. What we have done in the last few years is switch to an almost complete behavioral-based interview, which gets at a lot of these cognitive points, and we're kind of looking at the logistics of how to make it happen and how to make a transition perhaps within the next 5 years to MMI.
Okay, so it sounds like it's actually getting a pretty positive review from most of you guys here. Additionally, we have a lot of questions about being a non-traditional medical school applicant, and what they can, better do to make themselves stand out, to highlight the fact that maybe why they're non-traditional. Do you guys really look for those people into the personal statement, letters of rec, and what your typical non-traditional student might look like in your experience with that? So.
Well, I don't know what the traditional non-traditional student looks like, but I think, at least for us, and I would imagine similar situations, I think if you need to explain why you're a non-traditional student. The best place to explain that is going to be in your personal statement in some form or fashion, or when you're explaining your experiences. And that section on your AMCAS application needs to be very clear as to how you've spent your time. Just like you're filling out a job application, there really shouldn't be any blank time in there. Whatever it was for should really be spelled out, because otherwise somebody's looking at the application wondering why there's a blank, and if they're wondering why there's a blank, then they may just pass that over. But I think non-traditional students, we see that more and more. We talked about it this morning, where some students know they want to take 1, 2, or 3 years off before they go to medical school. When I was coming through, that really wasn't the case. You just went straight through. But now the students are taking 1 or 2 years off. They know they're going to do it, and it's not that uncommon anymore.
Well, what are some of the major mistakes that non-traditional medical students, applicants, may make on their applications?
I think that some of the biggest mistakes, as mentioned, is not really accounting for the time since they've graduated from college, and not being able to show kind of a timeline where they have been continuously moving in a direction of heading toward medical education. I think one of the other mistakes is we'll occasionally see people that are on their 5th and 6th career change, and that seems to be a bit problematic for me, because I don't know if it's indecisiveness or what, but you'd like to have at least some focus early on that they wanted to do something involving patient care. So I think, again, the devil is in the detail, and the biggest advice that I can give to the non-traditional applicant is to make sure that you're providing us with the detail so that we understand the path that you've taken to the front door of the medical school.
But wouldn't you say, though, even if you just woke up one morning and had an epiphany, realizing that you were called to be a physician, and you made that decision, and perhaps you were brilliant. You may have been a brilliant student, straight A's and everything, and then said, well, I'm sure I can make this transition. I'll just go ahead and take these prerequisite classes and then apply to medical school. So when you're saying what are some of the deficiencies that you see sometimes, is that commitment to the health profession and demonstrating that this is what you really want to pursue as part of a career that would involve shadowing, volunteer service, and health promoting activities, perhaps health-related research. You really need to immerse yourself in health profession development types of activities, and not just be someone who is really good in school and can do well on tests. And I know that's not the picture for everyone, but I'm saying that just to make a point in regards to even if you are that person, if you haven't demonstrated a commitment towards the health professions, and a lot of the attributes that we're looking for kind of crosses all health professions, really. And if you can't demonstrate that in your personal statement, and when you on the AMCAS list the types of volunteer services and things that you've participated in, you're going to fall short. And even if you make it to the interview process, you will not have a depth of understanding when you're sitting across the table from either the faculty interviewer, the student interviewer, or community member. You won't have any meat to put on your desire to be a health professional, and it's going to come across as perhaps, yes, this is a person's smart. He or she probably could do the work, but I'm not certain about their commitment to the health professions, and that's where you will probably have your biggest downfall.
Okay. Well, on that, maybe Dr. Hull, would you say that they could further illustrate their commitment to the academic side of medicine by doing a post-bac or some secondary education, even if they don't necessarily need it for improving their grades, but if it's been a while, to show that they're dedicated and they can still do the academics?
Yeah, I think one of the major issues that they've been out for a while and they haven't been in the classroom situation. I think for us it's going to be, are they ready for this intense, rigorous classroom experience in the basic sciences particularly? And so demonstration of that through a post-bac would be an ideal way to convince a admissions officer that they have had they have been away for a while, but they still have what it takes in order to participate in an academic environment that's rigorous as the first couple of years of medical school is concerned. So I would agree that a post-bac experience would be one way to actually do that. The other thing that I wanted to add to what my colleague said is that in some cases the supplemental application will also ask you or give you an opportunity to expend on your gap in education and what you've been doing with your life. I know we just recently added to our supplemental application something that asks our student or applicant what they have been doing if there's been a gap between their last attained degree and the time that they've applied to medical school. So look for those kinds of places on a supplemental as well as on the personal statement as a place to sort of expound on your experiences.
Okay. We can move on to another topic, but kind of related to this with the supplemental applications. So this is where you get to really look more into the person, into the applicant. Do you not throw out any of the primary AMCAS applications until you get their supplemental, like if you do an automatic secondary, or do you wait and compare both when you're reviewing your applicants?
At Wright State, we send everybody a secondary application, and we don't look at any applications until those secondaries are complete. So if they don't complete the secondary, it really never will get reviewed because it won't be considered a complete application. But we send everybody a secondary, and we believe that we want to get that other information in that applicant before we decide what we should do with them.
We actually take a little bit different approach, and we have a little bit of an academic screening, and we also screen for applicants that have had felonies or misdemeanors or institutional actions that we believe are grievous enough to warrant them not be considered for acceptance. But the boundaries on those, both GPAs and MCATs, are extremely liberal, so that the vast majority of applicants that complete an AMCAS and select the University of Miami will get a secondary.
When you talk about those misdemeanors, I mean, what do you consider things that they throw it out for? Because we often see things that really aren't felonies, or they aren't even misdemeanors, but students may list them on these applications.
Absolutely. We're seeing now misdemeanors from some states for people driving 3 miles an hour in a school zone, and that certainly is not something that we would worry about. Repeated drunken disorderly charges against an applicant over a period of time where there doesn't seem to be a learning curve that has occurred, or any type of situation that we believe could result in the individual having difficulty in being able to get a state license to practice medicine. So we often use some of the guidances that are established by the Board of Medicine to decide if we want to continue forward and offer a secondary.
At the David Geffen School of Medicine, we actually have over 5,500, maybe 5,800 applicants a year, and we couldn't really send out secondaries to all of those applicants. So roughly about 3,000 of our applicants will get secondaries, and that's based really on a screen that's pretty liberal in terms of their GPA and their MCAT scores. If they fall below a certain GPA that we don't think is going to be competitive for them to get into the medical school, or an MCAT score, then we won't send them a secondary. And that still leaves us with a good group of about 3,000 applicants to screen every year. And so, but like my colleagues, we are going to be looking, once we get those applicants, for things that would be negative predictors for them to be successful.
And at the Ohio State is somewhat similar in regards to the screening process. I think in general, whether one gets a secondary application, that's somewhat of a liberal framework in regards to making that decision. And then the follow-up one is what of those folks are going to be actually invited to interview, and I think that would be the more important question versus filling out another piece of paperwork and paying a fee for that.
So we have a lot of international students viewing in this panel. They're definitely the largest demographic of couldn't be at the actual conference, and so they'd like to know how the process differs for international students, and a little bit further, what percentage of your matriculates do you see that are international students, and how their applications may differ?
Well, I can make that real easy. Is unfortunately at the current time, due to the number of U.S. applicants that we're receiving, is we're not accepting international applicants, so that we require either U.S. citizenship or permanent residence to be able to consider for a secondary.
And the same thing goes at Wright State. We're a state institution, and we do not, we can't accept students that are international.
And similar at the Ohio State University College of Medicine. However, I want to just add a little bit more to that as far as an explanation. At one point we did, and the drawback is that if you're an international student, you do not qualify for federal loans. And the debt burden is such nowadays in regards to the cost of medical education. We've had a few instances where a student either had to transfer to another institution or not be able to complete their medical education because they did not have the money to be able to pay for an education, and their academic profile wasn't to the point where they were one of the top students and came in on an academic scholarship. So I think we're really trying not to put that student in a very, very difficult position in regards to being in school and not being able to obtain federal funding. And I think there are even some loans, different federal loan limitations in regards to international students. So if you're not necessarily independently wealthy, it really makes it difficult. But I do know there are some medical schools that accept international students, but perhaps they have more of a financial program to support those students. Now,
if you're an American citizen but have done most of your undergraduate schooling abroad, does that no longer apply? They can still...
So that's a different question. So if you're a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, I think your application, I'm not quite certain what the answer to that would be because I don't have a lot of experience in regards to actually, say you're a student and you did all your classes in New Zealand. We don't have, so I can't really give you a concrete answer to that right now. Most of the students that matriculate to the College of Medicine have gone to an accredited undergraduate institution in the United States, or yes.
That's the key for the University of Miami, is that if you are a U.S. citizen studying abroad, it has to be in a U.S. accredited institution, so that those credits will be accepted by AMCAS and be able to be verified. So again, it's very important for individuals that are attending schools abroad to make sure that that's in place. Now, that's very, very different from enrolling in a U.S. institution that offers a period of study abroad, because that certainly comes under the accreditation of the U.S. university that's founded from. So again, you know, there has to be a distinction there. I think that the big caution is for somebody in Europe that is not currently enrolled in a U.S. institution to make sure that the school that they're in does carry with it U.S. accreditation.
Yeah, I would agree that.
Okay. A little bit more of a discussion topic is how medical education has changed since you went to medical school, and possibly a little bit of how you would, maybe things you miss or things that you really think are for the better.
Well, I think that the computer generation is really the biggest change, because the access to information is unbelievably different just in the past decade. There once was a time when if one wanted to learn about something, it meant a trip to the library, often at 1 o'clock in the morning, to go through something called Index Medicus, which was this god-awful document that itself was voluminous, and that would then lead you to a journal that you then have to delve through the racks. So certainly the acquisition of knowledge was so much more difficult than it currently is, where basically with a search engine you can put in a term and come up with an amazing amount of information, and then it's just up to the reader to be able to discriminate between good information and bad information. So I would say the computer generation is probably the biggest change that I've seen.
I would echo that, but I'd also like to add that in addition to that, there's distance learning that we use as well. And so students don't even have to be in the same state in order to get the information that day in class. And so that's one opportunity for them to actually expand their horizons. One of the things, though, that I have really been impressed with is the development in most of our schools of problem-based learning curriculum. David Geffen School of Medicine pioneered this way back in 1994, and now it seems like it's almost the lay of the land for most schools, where the students actually have an opportunity to participate in discussions and case presentations and case discussions with clinicians in the first 2 years, as well as with their basic science teachers, but that the classroom now has shrunk to a 8 to 10 small group type of situation. And if you're at the David Geffen School of Medicine, like some of our other colleagues, the number of lecture hours is way down to only 10 hours maximum per week for those students. So less time in the classroom per se, more time in small groups, and the ability of technology to facilitate learning outside of the classroom is one of the things I think is things that are most apparent for most of us, I think, that are different.
And also, I would add earlier clinical experiences, meaningful clinical experiences. Back in the caveman days, when I went to medical school, those first 2 years of medical school, they were intense. You start off with that anatomy, then it's just intense science, pharmacology, it's just undergraduate science courses zoomed up 100%. And as Dr. Neve was speaking to earlier in our conference, the subjects taken individually, biochemistry, microbiology, and so forth, everyone can do those courses. It's just the fact that once you're in medical school, everything is compressed, and you're taking multiple tests concerning multiple topic areas at the same time. And I think and that was how it was back in the caveman days. Now, the whole curriculum is more clinically infused with trying to tie the biomedical science into its clinical applications, and having groups led by faculty talking about a clinical assessment and problem solving. And we also have experience with problem-based learning, and we kind of we call our curriculum an integrated pathway. We've kind of integrated components of problem-based learning with more of our traditional learning, and now we're even moving beyond that to a leave, serve, and inspire curriculum that's being put together now that really integrates more that biomedical science education with the clinical applications. Also, we have a lab where we have students being taped with standardized patients, and similar to, and so students are really getting experience in regards to the clinical skills portion of USMLE. It's called an objective structured clinical examination. So you're getting experience with case-based scenarios where you get to practice with actors and community folk in regards to how to obtain information, maintain and connect with the patient with culturally relevant awareness. And another, as I talk even more, so I think of
Okay, you done talked enough.
Okay, let's get my brother here from Rice State. It's time to, but so I'll defer the remainder of my time to Dr.
Yeah, and I just, because I know we get time going, and Dr. McDougall can go. So at Rice State, we have had the opportunity to have early clinical exposure, probably more than most medical schools, really since the inception of our medical school, which is really just going into its 30th year right now. And when we started doing early, we have introduction to clinical medicine after the first week of medical school. So all of our students began learning their clinical skills during their first year and first and second years from day one. And I think that's helped clinically, and I think we're not unique in that anymore. And it used to be a sort of a point that we could make with schools that we can't do anymore. But what we're doing, and I actually miss the classroom. I'm not sure. Most of our students, they can go from 8 to 12 or 9 to 1, and then they're done. And then they're expected to go study and do whatever. And like the other colleague said, they can watch class online and pull all these things up. And it's just a different way of learning, which I didn't grow up in that era, so I don't have that advantage or disadvantage to know if I like it. But I was one of the students who went to class every day and sat close to the front because I thought I was going to miss something. But we are actually looking at making some changes to our curriculum as well, like you guys are. And they're going to start having basically 4 years of classroom and 4 years of clinical work all at the same time. And that's actually being developed right now. So we'll be looking forward to see how that's all going to play out, because I don't really understand it 100% myself right now.
We've actually had the 4 years of clinical training now for quite some time at Miami with our close association with Jackson Memorial and University of Miami Hospital and the VA. And what it does is it allows us to use the classroom in the morning and then have the students with their same attendings who are also faculty in the afternoon seeing patients with the same disease states that they're learning about in the morning. And what we consistently hear back from the students is that it's so much easier to remember about a particular disease state when you're able to associate it with a patient that you've been involved with their medical care.
Just let me add just one more thing. I think I missed this particular point about medical school curriculums in general, and that is when most of my colleagues and myself actually went to medical school, we learned our curriculum in vertical silos. And now, of course, the curriculum is not in vertical silos in many places. It actually cuts across boundaries of clinical silos or anatomic boundaries in terms of you might be learning cardiovascular medicine or cardiovascular system, but you're going to learn anatomy, histology, pharmacology, and the clinical aspects of pathophysiology in that particular silo, as opposed to learning individually cardiac physiology or cardiac anatomy separate. So I think that that's a key theme that has happened across the medical education curriculum is instead of vertical, more horizontal integration.
Okay, and we've talked about this intensification of the academic workload as compared to the undergraduate classes. And then that can be, I guess, reflected in the increased workload or the busy schedule of a physician. So if you guys would like to comment on how the kind of balance, how you balance work, how you balance life, both in medical school and now as a physician and as all the other areas that you work as, like how you balance work and life.
Well, I think for students, it's a matter of being efficient, and you've got to learn how to be efficient as a medical student because you don't have much time to do anything else. And with the free time that you do have, you certainly don't want to be studying, I don't think. And the way I've looked at it is that you have to do things that whatever got you to medical school is probably going to help you get out of medical school. You have to continue to enjoy the things that you like to do. If it's watching sports, if it's playing piano, if it's whatever activities extracurricular, you need to try to keep some of that going. And I think a lot of schools have really good intramural activities, and I think at that level they're more advanced than the undergraduates. And I find that they end up winning a lot because some of them actually played intercollegiate sports in whatever those sports may be. But I believe you have to do whatever you enjoy, because if you just be a student, at least for most people, I don't think it's enjoyable for them.
I would say probably the key, let's say, skill set that a medical student will probably have to have, even if they didn't develop it while they were an undergrad, because I know I got better at it as a medical student, is time management. It's really an important component of being able to be successful in a career, no matter what that career is, and figuring out what you need to spend a lot of time doing and what things you need to spend more time or less time doing. Time management also takes into account realizing that it's not all about the curriculum or the test that's coming up, but it's also about, as my colleague just mentioned, your outside of your school life kind of management of your time. What kinds of time you spend with your family, important people in your life, because those commitments are also equally important. And also, I think one thing that tends to be overlooked probably more often than not, because we just don't think about it, we take it for granted, is just, 3 meals a day, health, keeping your health up and your exercise level up. Sometimes that will infuse energy into the rest of your environment and the rest of the day, the things that you have to take care of.
And to follow on that, one thing you'll quickly learn is that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, especially when you get on some of the busier rotations. If you don't eat breakfast and all types of things are going on, you're in trouble, because you may not have a whole lot of time to eat lunch, or you may not eat lunch at all. So now you've gone from maybe eating something at 7 o'clock the previous evening, and you didn't eat breakfast. Now you're on the surgery service and you're in the middle of this 8-hour surgery and you haven't eaten in over 12 hours. That's a problem. Okay. And then two, and actually I think it's easier to really incorporate more exercise and so forth into your time as a student, because really your job is to go to school, go to class, eat lunch, whatever, and study. But you cannot do that. I've tried. You can't just go to school, eat, come back to your apartment or whatever, study, go to sleep. Because what'll happen is you won't be able to sleep that well. And what we know is sleep, during that sleep period, it helps you really ingrain that knowledge that you've just learned during that previous day. If you're not sleeping well, you're not really learning and retaining as much as you should. So I recommend that all the students whatever you like to do, if it's walking, swimming, some type of physical activity every day so you can maintain a more healthy balance as far as your lifestyle is concerned. And also, instead of maybe just trying to survive medical school, flourishing and thriving in medical school, because it's something that you want to try to build into your life, because you're really going to have a hard time if you don't.
I know we started today talking a little bit about the non-traditional student, and the non-traditional student often has to be even better at time management than the regular student, because they often have a husband or a wife or significant other. They may also have 2 or 3 children that they're involved with parenting, and that provides even more demands on their time. And that's one of the other things that we look at with the non-traditional student, or really any applicant that has other significant demands on their time, is how have they demonstrated in the past that they manage time during those days when it seems there's hundreds of things to do and so little time to accomplish it. And that's often one of the questions we'll probe very carefully during the time of interview.
How do you guys look at then, along that same line, when you have a student with a family, have you seen instances where moving the family with the student is detrimental, and when it's helpful? And how do you, with your history and knowledge, how do you counsel students in that regard?
Well, one of the things we do is we have Married Students Association. So we actually try to get them hooked up with other successful married couples in the medical school for that purpose. We also have well-being dinners for our, which are sponsored by our Student Affairs Office, but they recruit faculty members to actually participate in the well-being dinners. And most of the faculty members have families. So there's an opportunity for our students to actually get some mentoring from people who are in their environment outside of their classroom environment, and for those kinds of questions as well. When it comes to the interview process, you'd like to know that a student has set up a support network, or has a support network available to them when they apply for medical school. So we don't discriminate against them. We just really want to know that they have thought about this, what it really entails, and how they want to handle it. I personally don't know that there's a correct answer to the question you came up with, whether or not you would do well away from a family or better out. That's a personal issue with regard to that individual. Right. Some people might not do very well at all when they're away from their family, even though they have all of this free time now that they didn't have before, and vice versa. So I can't really come up with an answer to that.
Intuitively, I think they probably would be better with the family being kept together. I know that we've had many very, very successful married medical students that draw a tremendous amount of support from their spouse or their significant other, that they're able to provide them with a lot of the basic fundamental things. The student is coming home and dinner is ready and his clothes is taken care of, and this helps to streamline some of the demands that the medical student that's alone would have to deal with on their own. So it can work both ways, but the secret is to making sure that they have that support system, and that the spouse or significant other is very supportive of the amount of time that they're going to have to put into being a successful student.
Now, another aspect of this is, with the fact that 50% or more of our medical students now are women, and now we're dealing with 2 career households. I agree with my colleagues in regards to the fact that I think planning and having some support type symptoms, I really like what you said. We may steal that from you. So we have like learning communities, but the Married Student Association, I think that's really good. But there's a lot of dynamics to that, and I think that's something that the students really need to look at carefully, because we're really, from the interview process, because we don't want to discriminate or being viewed as, well, I didn't get accepted into this school because I'm married. So we're not going to go a whole lot into that unless the student brings it up. But from a standpoint of the listening audience, if that's your particular scenario, you really have to have a heart-to-heart talk in regards to how are we going to support each other in our individual careers, and then if there's any children involved, that's another layer of responsibility. And I would say, if you have the opportunity, especially if you have multiple acceptances, this is a situation where, say you get accepted to your, dream school or whatever, but you also get accepted to your hometown school or school nearby, and your mom's there, grandmother's there. You should really seriously think about staying home. And then once you do well and succeed in medical school, and you're going into residency, even then you're going to have to make those same decisions. You're making money then, but still your time commitment is even going to be greater. So I would think that kind of putting aside your perhaps dream school or whatever, because you want to succeed, and I'm pretty sure all of us here on this panel have seen situations where students, for some reason or another, perhaps there was a child was ill. I know that just recently happened. A child was ill, and the student took a leave of absence, but still was never really able to recover to be successful in medical school. So if you can stay close to home, that I would highly recommend that.
We were talking a little bit then about if you're in a dual career household and support and just the finances too of medical school it costs a lot of money to go to medical school. So what, if you want to comment on how you've seen students deal with that, if it's loans or if you have any programs through your schools or.
Well, I would say at Wright State, because we're a community-based medical school, we don't have university hospital on campus. You have to be able to get around, so you have to have transportation. We have students who come from like states like New York where people, they don't drive, and they have to come and take driving lessons, and then they have to get a car and all these things. And so I think they need to buy a used car that can get them through, not anything new. And same thing as you go into residency. I also think, however, that as you look at medical education, it costs, and the price is pretty hefty no matter where it is, except maybe California, maybe still a lot cheaper. No, not anymore than it used to be than other places. And when you're talking about $40,000 to $60,000 or more in tuition and fees, you definitely have to pay the tuition, but you don't always have to take all of the money that are there for your living expenses. If you don't need it, then don't get it. And if you need it, then you can still go back because it's already part of your budget and get that money. I think that sometimes, I remember as a student, I deserve to have this and I deserve to have that, and I probably didn't deserve to have any of it unless I really actually needed it. And looking back, I probably could have done with a little less borrowing of money to go to medical school.
I would strongly recommend that students or applicants take all of the advantage of the financial officers that most medical schools have available to them and the advice that they offer. I know that our financial person, when she speaks to our interviewing class, gives a simple example of what it costs to buy a cup of coffee using money that you're borrowing from the federal government across the period of time of that 4 years. And when you multiply it out, it ends up that you're going to be repaying somewhere in the order of $20,000 that you otherwise would not have had to if you simply did not buy that cup of coffee in the morning on the way to medical school.
Yeah,
there's some interesting mathematics.
I would echo that, because I think our financial aid office does an excellent job in trying to find funding for students based on their financial need. Still in California, if you're going to a state school, one of the UC schools, it's going to be cheaper than if you're going to one of the private institutions. That's no doubt the case. But the cost of education is rising even in the state schools, and California is no exception to that rule in terms of that. So good planning, spending the dollars wisely is always important, and for those students who are married, who have kids, financial aid packages are hopefully structured to support them in their endeavors to go to medical school.
Okay. Moving on to talking about a little bit going back to the balance between work and life. As physicians now, I know we talked about in the first panel this morning, choosing between going in, putting patients above family sometimes and family above patients, but how to make that decision. And if ever you've encountered a situation where you yourself have been carried away with one more than the other, or if you've seen a student fall into that trap, and how you think it's best to avoid it.
I'd like to try and answer that question because I think it's an important component of how we decide that we're going to spend our time as physicians. We tend to, particularly early in our careers, and I know I felt this way, felt that I had to be on call 24/7 even though I wasn't, and I always had my beeper on all the time. And for what I do in radiology, I probably didn't have to, but I was one of the primary people that did interventional pediatric radiology in my practice, and so there weren't any other people that were currently doing that. As I got a little bit further on in my career, I did realize that there were other subspecialists, other people that did manage the patients, and that when I wasn't there, especially when I was on vacation, somebody took care of the problem. So I think we do have to find a balance, and when we are on call, we're on call, but when we're off, we clearly have to be connected to what we're off, to things that we're connected to, like our family and other activities that should take precedence when you're not on service that way. It helps when you have a spouse that understands your commitments. And is supportive of those things, but I do think that there have to be certain boundaries drawn, and you cannot be the person to do everything all the time in most situations. So it's sometimes difficult, but you do have to be able to turn the practice over to a partner to cover for you from time to time.
So you don't have an S on your chest?
No,
You're not Superman?
not even close.
But that speaks to the movement of practice for medicine. I think most doctors nowadays are joining group practices. Now, there are circumstances where folks are in single practice, don't necessarily have a group of others to lean on, but I would even think that in those types of circumstances, if you're in that type of circumstance, you would want to reach out to others to develop a support network. Now, that's one of the great things about being an academic clinician at a medical school. More than likely, you're going to have others who you can turn the reins over to in regards to a service or a practice, and you share in responsibility of covering your patients. And I think having that downtime where you can focus on yourself and sharing that responsibility will lend itself to longevity and less likely and a less likelihood for burnout. Burnout is a real possibility, and so setting boundaries, I would think would incorporate being perhaps more proactive in regards to having a network, a group of faculty or physicians where you share in those responsibilities and be able to hand off care when appropriate. That's not you relinquishing your S on your chest, but you're really providing better care because what we're seeing now more and more, the training hour requirements and so forth, there less stress is being put on residents in regards to the amount of time they have in regards to being limited to the hospital. Now, just because we're faculty and we train like, you know, everybody on this, we didn't have any duty hour limitations and so forth. It was really stressful, and so we're not residents, so we don't really fall under those work hour restrictions per se. But the same things apply to the reasons why these hours are being cut back. You can only do so much when you're sleep deprived. You just don't think as well as you should, and so that 8 hours of sleep that you're able to get is going to make you much more efficient, and it's going to make you a better clinician, teacher, and researcher. So you have to put yourself in a circumstance where you have that type of support.
I kind of look at it as being a continuum as we train the medical students to be able to cut out time from their schedule for athletics, for whatever their interests, for their family. It's really developing good habits that will carry on through residency and then ultimately out into practice. And I think that that's one of our obligations as a medical school, is to make sure that the students are taking time for themselves, for their family, for something that is an interest, and getting away from the studying for a period of time, because those habits will carry on until through their adult lives as residents and as attending physicians, to make sure that they continue to cut away time that is so important for their own development and preventing burnout and a whole host of other potential accidents from trying to be a Superman. I don't think we want anybody in this day and age to feel obligated to having to practice medicine 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, forever.
I think, and I actually learned something just the last few minutes that maybe my wife's been trying to tell me for a while, but I'm a solo practitioner, and then I have the students who call me or text me at whatever's going on, and then I feel like I can never turn it off, and you feel like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. How do you balance? I mean, there's a balancing act, and like you said, the student needs to get out, and so does the attending doctor as well. So I've learned something in the past few minutes that I need to put into practice.
Okay, well, we're at time, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was good.
Yeah.
Imagine an applause.